Welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm Angelo Robles, and welcome to At Family Office and Family Office TV. And for my members, welcome the members of SFO Continuity. I'll also include, as it's been a very busy summer for me, that we now have new platforms. Now, some of the content will be repetitive, some of it will be spaced out differently, but there will be some proprietary content also on my new Angelo Robles podcast on Apple and Spotify, as well as I've gotten with the times and I opened up a Rumble account. So, of course, you're going to run to all your computers now and just sign up for my incredible guest. It's not me, it's the guests that I have that make it, I hope, special. And today we have one of those guests, a 22-year-old, not my youngest guest ever, but pretty close. A 22-year-old. Next Gen discusses family offices, geopolitics, gold, Bitcoin, and honestly much more. I just couldn't fit it in a title. So I hope you enjoy my discussion today with Thaddeus Cook, a 22-year-old rising star of the Cook family office. His mother will be blushing. The conversation promises to delve deep into the intersections of economics, geopolitics, and the ever-evolving landscape of investing. As a member of Generation Z, Thaddeus brings a fresh perspective to critical issues, offering unique insights, shaping the future of family offices and the role of the next generation. Thaddeus, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. And hi, Mom.
Last time I saw Thaddeus was in the iconic New England summery destination of Newport, Rhode Island. It wasn't that long ago. He also came to a little shindig I did at the Cookhouse. For those of you that are familiar with Rhode Island, of course, in Newport, you're going to know the Cookhouse. I don't know if he saw me indulge in one of my now legendary to me cigars, but I also don't want to be a bad influence on Thaddeus. But next time, you may have to tell your mom, Angelo may be taking out that cigar, and I suggest you refrain, Thaddeus. It could be a bad habit, but I'm too old to stop. It's a pleasure to have you on. We have a lot to discuss. Like in many of my long-form conversations, we have a lot of subjects to discuss. If there's a subject or two that is not your cup of tea, audience, you'll probably just have to wait 3 or 5 minutes and it moves on to something else. So on that note, we'll get right to one of the more bombastic of my questions. Is Trump an existential threat to democracy, or is this a narrative designed to influence perception?
Well, I would say it's for the most part just the media and the media pushing a narrative. I do think that Trump has some of that cult of personality in him that I'm a little wary of. But overall, no, I don't think that he's going to just turn into some dictator or refuse to leave office. I mean, he left office before.
We could argue a little bit reluctantly.
Of course.
But yes, that is true. My audience knows I'm not one to be short on having something to say, and I think that makes it also an interactive dialogue. Effectively, I agree with you, and we do have case in point of 4 years, beginning in 2016, and actually, if you look at the economy, if you look at the perspective of what was happening around the world, and some of that could be luck and coincidence, there was nothing that would indicate, in my perspective, an existential threat. Is there fair questions on Trump's character and morals? Yes. Is there some concern he's not a team builder because lots of things that happened and did go wrong? But also, I could argue, unlike others that just stick with someone, he learned, he made mistakes for sure. And hopefully we'll see better if he's elected in terms of quote unquote team building. There are concerns we'll all have. He may not be the perfect candidate for many of us, but again, we have to compare it to what the alternative is. And on that note, in a world fraught with turmoil, can Harris truly lead America Or are her leadership abilities or capabilities perhaps by some being overestimated, and it's fair to be concerned?
Well, with Harris, my biggest concern is going to be credibility. Joe Biden clearly wasn't all right up there for a long time, still isn't, and she was heavily involved in the concealment of that. So that credibility thing is big for me. But just in terms of her actual true capabilities as a leader, I've not really heard much about her presidency, I mean, vice presidency, but if Joe Biden's been lagging behind and needing some help here or there, or not be quite up to the job, then Harris is probably the one who's been calling a lot of the shots, like a good vice president should do. And I think we can see, just based off of the trajectory this country's been going in, if she's been the one calling the shots, it's not been great.
Well, I would agree. I would probably add, I think it's more of a deeper cabal, a deep state in the Democratic Party that, yes, I guess she would be a part of, but I think there's others globally and domestically here in America. That's not to say that there's not some forces behind the other party in America, the Republicans. I just think depending on which party tends to become more in power, and as someone who's been around, I guess I'm old, for many, many decades, the pendulum does appear to shift. And any one side that gets too powerful for too long, the entrenchment begins to occur. And once you have power, you're reluctant. And to some degree, as we arguably saw from Trump, in terms of wanting to give that up. With this being an election year, audience, and I've already done it a fair amount this summer, there will be lots to come from deep macro thinkers, economists, political pundits. I look to be fair from both sides of the aisle. That's not to say that I'm not going to give my opinion and go back and forth with a guest. I listen to a lot of the popular podcasts too, and I love Joe Rogan. But really, except for Joe Rogan, I think a lot of the guests or a lot of the hosts kind of acquiesce to a guest and don't challenge them because they're uncomfortable to do so. I like to have uncomfortable conversations. I think I kind of revel in it, actually. That's why I like debates. What is the biggest challenge we'll go with both the Democrats and the Republicans face with your generation, Generation Z? And maybe from each of their perspectives, how could they bridge that gap?
Sure, we'll start with the Democrats first. I think they're in the better position. Gen Z, though, I feel that a lot of the Gen Z people on the left-wing side are getting increasingly, I guess you would say, communistic, increasingly hardcore socialist, increasingly critical race theory, things like that. And I think the Democratic Party is trying to remain fairly center-left where they want to be. And then, of course, there's the whole Bernie Sanders thing. Bernie, by all accounts, should have been the nominee back in 2016, but he wasn't because the Democrats knew that he wouldn't win in a runoff actual election. But that's who a lot of the Democrats actually wanted. I am a little concerned about the Democratic Party drifting that way, and I think in order to get a lot of the younger crowd, they're going to have to, at least on some certain issues like LGBT, critical race theory, and general socioeconomic issues. I think they're going to have to go further left in order to get the younger crowd. With the Republicans, they have a reputation, whether it's deserved or not, of being the party of the old rich white men. That's their party. That's their stereotype, right? You have two types of Republican voters: old rich white men and rednecks with a Confederate flag on their pickup truck. That's the stereotype, right? And I think the Republican Party is doing a good job trying to get at more young people in, and also more people that aren't white in, more women in. Representation, I think, is important. I mean, I'm by no means one of those, get everybody in. You need all this affirmative action type people. But I think representation is important, and having different people of different viewpoints and different backgrounds in your party gives you a lot of diversity of thought. And diversity of thought, I think, is a really big strength.
Of course. I mean, in adding to it, looking at it from the Republican side, and when I was young, I skewed to being more what I would define as more 80s liberal, And to some degree, we age, reality sets in, and we adapt our thinking as new information comes into us. So, by nature, throughout time, have younger people generally skewed to what we would call more liberal perspectives? The answer is yes, but that's no reason, as more and more younger people register to vote, that Republicans should be ignoring them. And I think a big issue, it's just a statistic, specifically with younger. I'll even define that broader than Gen Z. Under 40-year-old unmarried women are heavily, heavily Democratic. So the Republicans have some big challenges. And I can make the point that the candidate Trump is not necessarily attractive to either, in that's just what the polls show. Broadly, Generation Z, and even defined as 40-year-old and under, specifically unmarried women. And this is an issue that could become a major issue, not just in this election, but over time, if it's not something that is addressed more internally within the structure of the Republican Party.
I agree with you. And
please continue.
Sorry. Yeah. So I agree with you. And Trump is definitely a very abrasive guy. He's not warm and friendly. He's a killer, really. And I don't think he appeals to the like you said, the unmarried women, specifically because he's such a nasty guy, or at least he has that persona of being a nasty guy, right? He's seen as the schoolyard bully, at least that's how the media paints him. And with him getting back on Twitter as of yesterday or 2 days ago, I'm concerned about him doing those tweets again and riling a bunch of people up, ruffling some feathers that shouldn't be ruffled, that aren't going to help him.
Right. The audience that he would entertain on X, 99.9% of them already know about him and would arguably vote for him anyway. It just potentially may offend others. I even looked at the debate with Biden from about 4 to 5 weeks ago, and I picked up, and all I care about is policies. I don't care about your persona. I don't care about how you dress. If your policies are to the betterment of this country, not necessarily to me, to what I perceived as the betterment of this country with the challenges, and we have a lot of them, then I'm going to vote for you, even though I may not find you to be the most ideal or perfect president. But one thing that I picked up in the debate with Biden, one, of course, Trump lacks a level of being more of a gentleman. Neither of them shook hands, and that's on both of them. And there was just I actually thought that Trump could have pounced on Biden for many of his gaffes more, so I'll give him a little bit of credit for that. But he has such a sourpuss face, like he does. It's comical looking at it now and looking back, but I think that people are swayed from an emotional perspective and making them feel inviting, showing empathy. I think all those things are important and a little bit more of a hope for the future. So again, I look at this and being somewhat disappointed in what we have to choose from. I'm not going to quite say I'm picking from the lesser of two evils. I'm making a choice based on information at the moment that I think is best for the country. And you all will have to make your own decision as well. And absolutely, you're kidding me. You're thinking that these issues, political and geopolitics, don't play into the impact to family offices. They're a massive impact to family offices. And one day you're going to see, we're not there yet. One day, maybe it's an election 2 times from now, 8 years out, we're going to look at more and more, depending on what our shape our country is in and the deficit, of a rally for taxing unrealized capital gains. That fight is coming. It's not happening right now. It's not going to happen next year, but I think that's coming, and that would be horrific and disastrous from a variety of different perspectives. But in moving on, how do you, as a member of the rising generation and Generation Z, define and kind of discover your purpose in a world like no other that is full of your cell phone and other quote-unquote distractions?
Sure. A lot of people in Gen Z, if I were to define Gen Z, I would say they're like wandering aimlessly through life. They don't know what they're doing. They're afraid. To some degree, I think a lot of them are hedonistic. I try to keep myself grounded in reality. I try to unplug as much as I can, connect with nature. Of course, I'm a Christian. My faith is important to me, so I try to do my prayers. I read the Bible from time to time, and that gives me kind of a guideline, a pathway of what I need to do in order to be a functional and good person.
And I agree with you. And I noticed that more and more from the younger generation being a little bit aimless and a little bit, and I'm going to, again, empathetic here, some concern about the future. And I think there's somewhat of a right to be concerned. But as opposed to laying back, being reactive, be more proactive in yourself, read more, learn more, exercise, be in good shape, take action, do things, be a positive influence, no matter what side of the aisle that may be for you. I like the fact that you're potentially at least taking a stand and taking action on it. So I think that's something to be commended. Be a leader. If you don't have culture that you're in now, develop your own damn culture. Define your purpose, develop culture that circles into leadership and do great things, employ people, be a positive impact on society. You find a level of being grounded in religion, and I think that's great. And that's been deteriorating if you look at the statistics going back probably to the 60s into early 70s. Another subject, and we've covered it somewhat in a variety of ways, but we'll probably do more on that and the impact on family, society, and family offices moving forward. What strategies would you recommend for effectively incorporating the rising generation for successful families into the family enterprise? That may be the family business, the family office and investing, and maybe philanthropic initiatives, collectively, all of them.
Sure. That's a really hot button issue that's talked about at every conference we go to. I think there's not really a good answer to it. My mother got me involved from a very young age. I remember what she was doing stuff in the office or working on important things, being on calls, and I was in the room. Maybe I was playing with toys, but I was in the room. And I think getting them involved is a big deal. In addition to that, you can't force somebody to do something they don't want to do. If they truly have no interest in the family business or the family ventures and what the family's doing, that's okay. I think that's okay to say. I don't think you should be forcing somebody to go into something they don't want to do, or if they have no interest in it, or if they don't have a good skill set for it. Maybe they're not tailored to it. Maybe they're not investment minded. I can't be a rocket scientist. So I just couldn't. So maybe somebody isn't investment minded, but they're good in another area. You can find a job for them to do if they're willing to do it. But again, at the end of the day, if they're not willing to be a part of it, they don't want to be a part of it, don't force them to. That'll just grow resentment. But I think that getting them involved early, respecting their opinion, at the very least explaining what you're doing, even if you're not going to be getting them involved in the decision making, explain why you're making that decision and hear them out, hear their concerns out. I think that goes a long way.
If I could ask you and arguably push back a little bit as well, I think I brought it up in a podcast 2 weeks ago about someone relative your age that disagreed with some of the investment direction of the family and wanted to be heard, which I think is fair. I think the rising generation is the future leader. They have insight that the elders may have grown stale on, and having discussions, including debate, and then moving on from the argument and making a decision, if I could use the word argument, is important. But my was a little bit of arrogance from their perspective. First of all, rather bluntly, they didn't make the money. That's one thing. So to demand change, as opposed to maybe start with a small part of the portfolio and then prove that it's worth it from a variety of perspectives over time. I agree the elders need to listen. Let's go with that word elder. Elder to you, maybe someone 35. But I think at the end of the day, there needs to be somewhat of a respect for the older generation. And are they doing a good job, depending on how you define it and benchmark it? And to just jump in without experiences, maybe go and work, earn your own money, invest it how you want, prove yourself, and then have an opportunity to step into more of a leadership role, including of the capital. Maybe I'm wrong. I actually want you to disagree with me. What do you think?
I think for the most part, that's a valid perspective. I think that particularly with younger generations that have different political views from the older ones, they could be a radical political divide there. That's going to cause a lot of issues in the family office and asset allocation. That's not been an issue in my family. I'm basically a clone of my mother. But when it comes to different kinds of investment strategies, yeah, I can see that being an issue. The young person wants to invest more in environmentally friendly things or whatever it is, and the older generation only cares about profit, right? There's something to be said with that. I think that both sides should always approach things from a place of cooperation, mutual respect, and trust. I don't think there should be any kind of attitude of, you didn't make the money, I'm going to deal with it my own way, it's my money, I made it. And of course, that's also a difference for multi-generational families. I'm Gen 3, so my mother didn't make the money either, really. And of course, she expanded on it, grew upon it. But when it comes to the original Gen 1s versus Gen 2s, I think that's a different conversation with Gen 1 and 2 than it is for 2 and 3 and 3 and 4. I think those conversations change.
You are very correct. I'm going to bring up another word that I used in some of my interviews with various thought leaders and family dynamics, and that is the verbiage. And watch my interviews with Charles Lowenhall, Carol Pepper, Susan Schoenfeld, which was very recent. The verbiage of stewardship. I think on the surface, it's said in good faith, in that we have a family legacy and brand, we have certain character and morals, and you have an obligation to fulfill that, to be the best that you could be, to honor your bloodline that in theory goes back hundreds of thousands of years, to live up to your potential and carry the family name and brand effectively with a level of class and respect. But when I think about it from another perspective, that does sound a little bit burdensome. Everyone has different perspectives of how we define happiness and success. And I could see the point of being a steward of a past legacy and money is arguably an albatross. How do you have that balance? There's probably a degree there where both sides are correct, and everyone's going to be different as an individual. How do you balance that as a rising, and I'll throw that word at you, steward yourself?
Yeah. I care about not squandering everything that's been given to me. I care about continuing the legacy, but that's just me. Frankly, I don't think there's anything wrong with washing your hands and walking away. I really don't. I do think there's something wrong with not wanting to be involved, but still wanting to get the benefits of it. I think that's a problem. But if you want to go your own way and not deal with the family assets and just do your own thing, be your own person, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, really. I wouldn't put pressure on yourself. I used to be like that. I used to care a lot about the family legacy and whatnot, but really, who cares? They're dead. So I care about making sure that the people that I love and know, and my family members that are alive currently, are proud of me, and I try to do my best. But I don't think there's anything wrong with walking away.
Is it possible, in the perspective of being protective of the capital that we define as wealth, that you become overly conservative? Now, we could get into economics macro, the impact of the decline of purchasing power. So how do you guard against the fact of the wealth was probably created the generation before your mom by risks that were taken in business? Maybe those risks don't need to be duplicated at the moment, but by being overly protective and conservative and careful of breaking things, that you're slowly, like a frog boiling in water, the damage is just going to take a long time to be seen. How do you balance that?
I don't think there's a good answer to that, but you don't want to be so stagnant that of course you get left behind, and or inflation kills you, or you're in a bunch of traditional investments. If you're heavily invested in tobacco in like 1970, good luck with those now. Like if that's what you stayed in, that's not exactly great. So yeah, the things change, the winds change. You have to be to some degree flexible. I would always be cautious though, and I know that's kind of hypocritical coming from a crypto guy, but I would say be cautious and yeah, but be cautious and if you already have a certain level of wealth that you think is comfortable, that you're happy with, and you can already do your philanthropy that you enjoy, make the world a better place so that you feel good about yourself. I don't think there's really a right answer on how hungry you need to be for more versus how conservative you are. I would say you should always play it by ear. You should always keep your finger on the pulse of new innovation. Try to be involved in everything. Try to I would say go to these conferences that you and I always go to so that you can see what everybody else is doing. That way you don't get left behind. And
sometimes you learn what not to do at those conferences.
Yes, you do.
And
True.
how would, trying to see how to, we'll come back to that, related to that, and actually from this perspective, what advice would you give to parents aiming to raise productive, purpose-driven children in the complexities of today's world?
Well, that I'm not a parent, so I can't really say, but be involved with your kids. Be good to your kids, respect your kids, try to teach your kids good values. This is all, none of this should be new to you. This should all just sound like I'm reading off Google. But
you'll be surprised how many people need to be reminded of it. Trust me.
True. My mother always tried, she works all the time. When I was young, she worked all the time. And she always made sure she made time to do activities with me, spend time with me and my brother, and also get us involved with whatever she was working on so that we didn't feel left out. I think having active and proactive parenting, it's easier to nip it in the bud than it is to fix it. And of course, there's the old adage, an ounce of prevention equals a pound of cure. So.
And Thaddeus, if you don't mind, because it could relate into my follow-up, did you go to a private school?
I did, yes. And then I was homeschooled as well until university. And I thought that the homeschool environment was very good, and it gave me a really quality education. And I'm thankful that my grandmother was mostly my teacher. I'm thankful that she had the time and the willingness and also the ability to teach me on a variety of different subjects.
That is excellent. And yes, they do need to have the ability, which is more than just IQ and competency. There's been incredible baseball and football players that are the best in the world, and they can't teach it for shit. They don't have the patience, and it's just kind of not part of their DNA. So the capability of marrying those together and being disciplined and taking the time. I would say sometimes families of wealth, they rely on private schools. They rely on others. They're busy. They're building businesses. They're buying businesses. They're traveling. I would say it's important to show that we're human, that we fail at certain things, that we change our mind when new information comes in. And we have a responsibility to children to be hands-on with them. We all know that the schools, even the best private schools, K through 12, there's so much that they don't teach. What do they really teach about finance, about advanced finance, to some degree about emotional intelligence, about communication? We kind of learn that organically being thrust into it, and maybe that is a part of the learning process. But I do believe that parents need to have a more, quote unquote, a hands-on role. There is an old saying that you don't know this yet. If you have children, you will. You're as happy as your unhappiest child. And that is both it's the obligation of being a parent, but it's also the grand pleasure. And I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I've been very, very open publicly, which I am, all my warts and all. I've been humbled so many times, I can't even count it. I actually wish I had more children. Like looking back now, I guess theoretically I might, as far as I know, be able to change that if I wanted. But there's other factors, of course, that play into it. But hate to make it a little bit personal, you all, but hopefully that's what makes it engaging as well. How crucial is mindset in determining success, and what practices help to cultivate a winning mindset?
Well, this is pretty easy. Mindset is 99.99% of everything. If you go out there and you think, yeah, everything I touch turns to gold, I pick good investments, I know good people, I'm well connected, I have a good network of people to rely on, I'm positive, I'm capable. All these things, they matter. Your subconscious is always listening, so you should never say anything self-deprecating to begin with. But also, having that confidence, having that know-how, and it should come from a place of truth. You shouldn't have an ego. You should have a honest representation of your own capabilities, but you should be proud of those capabilities, and you should be willing to use those capabilities. I hate it when people have a quitter mindset, oh, woe is me kind of mindset. I've seen plenty of people in life have every opportunity given to them and they still mess up, and it's all because of their mindset. And I've seen people that have come from nothing and pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, and they had that mindset that I'm going to succeed, I know what I'm doing, and they turn out much better. Mindset's everything.
I mean, man, do I completely agree. I mean, you're talking to someone who's interviewed in person Tony Robbins multiple times and definitely a fan, and many others, Jim Rome and others, that those philosophies were very, very important to me. And when I interview billionaires for certain series that I do, mindset, exactly like you said, really is a large part of it. Now, there's multiple things that play in, sometimes including luck, but mindset is everything. You're going to fail. You need to be resilient. You need to be able to see things, to iterate, to move forward. But your ability to have positive affirmations. So there was a study, I'm going to get it a little wrong, but effectively they looked at people or children, I believe it was age 3 or 4, and then followed them through. And those that were exposed to more words above the average by whatever it was, age 3 or 4, so not 3,000 words, but 5,000 words, and even more important, more consistent, arguably earned, and maybe some unearned, positive affirmations from a parent, a relative, and others, I guess including even a teacher, is very, very important to, again, we're going back a little bit to children and growing up and upbringing. And in my experiences, I find that to be totally true. In today's globalized world, young man, and you're still going to feel out what's going to be a good fit for you, you have the opportunity to decide where to live and work to make maximum impact and satisfaction. How important is something like travel to you and the opportunity both onshore and offshore and experiencing the world in different cultures?
Sure. I can't speak for everybody in my generation, but I'll speak for myself. I care a lot about travel. I don't want to spend all my time in the office. I really don't. I like seeing different parts of the world, seeing different cultures, different people from different backgrounds, different socioeconomic statuses. I think, not to use the word again, but diversity of thought is very important. So I try to get exposed to different backgrounds, different worldviews, different religious beliefs, everything. And I think that makes you in general a much more well-rounded, understanding, and I guess less bigoted person in general.
Yes, I think it does make us more well-rounded. We have a greater understanding and more empathy for the world. Even going back to what you noted earlier that I'll follow up on a little bit, I've never met a successful person, never, not in the billionaires that I've interviewed, that I've known, that I've smoked cigars with, and forget billionaires, even those that broadly I'll define as successful, that have a victim mindset, the world might be against you, by the way. You might be right. And you know what? There's relatively little you could do about that, but have the right mindset, act accordingly, and move forward positively. Take action, do the right thing, and don't play the victim. Get up and move forward. And I think that relates a little bit to some of the differences I see between, quote unquote, the right and the left and rising generations now, or the young ones. I think it's comfortable in terms of playing the victim. And maybe there were points in my life, maybe even recently, with mistakes that I made where I looked to play it too. And I always need to pinch myself or snap myself out of that. There's nothing good that comes from that. I do have a question relative. It's a little off topic to the travel and moving around. And in some of the consultative work I've done, and this is not going to make me popular and not make me popular with younger people, by the way, I question whether remote family offices really work and remote work in general. So what reminds me about this is reading Eric Schmidt's comment relatively recently, basically lambasting the modern Google for effectively becoming probably too woke and a little bit too the inmates, let's go with it, running the asylum. Now, I know everyone is going to hate on me. Angelo, I'm a professional, I'm disciplined. The travel to work is annoying. I don't need the water cooler effect. And for some of you, maybe 5 or 10%, I actually do think that is true. And it probably is even a distraction. But I don't know how many of you are great and are going to become the best that you could be, especially if you're young and you need the training and experience. So as much as you may not like it, Thaddeus, and I know you're in a different position now, but for someone who's young, do you think you could become all you could be, being isolated and remote? Or is there value in being part of a collective, of a group, and learning?
It depends on if we're talking specifically within like a corporate and workplace context, I think it depends entirely on the culture of the organization. I have run a remote sales team before. We were the top performing sales team at the company. This was before I came to work for my family office, and we had a no holds barred, no excuses kind of culture, and we outperformed everybody. The managerial team did work in the office for the most part. Two of the managers did not, and they worked fully remotely. I had kind of a hybrid arrangement, but I was in the office most of the time because that's what I liked. I think that there's definitely a strength to remote work. I can see very easily, and in fact I have seen it, people in a traditional office environment slacking off, not doing their jobs, sitting by the water cooler for 20 minutes, making the rounds, talking to everybody instead of working. I don't think that the lack of productivity is specifically a remote work issue. I just think remote workplaces are under the microscope, and because of that, everybody's pointing at these issues, which are an issue everywhere.
I like it. Bring the different opinion. So I'm going to align a little bit more with Eric Schmidt on that one. But again, disagreement and open discussion, and how we learn is by having conversations. And the reality is people are different. So it does vary and depend. So part of that goes back to the most important aspect of a family office, bar none by far, is the people. So making the right decision on leadership in senior positions and the people that you hire is absolutely number one. And rather bluntly, sometimes making an immediate decision on the people and bringing in someone who's more attuned and, for lack of a better word, better, that alone is effectively a big bump in improvement. We kind of covered it a little bit, but a little different perspective of asking it. What are the unique strengths and potentially pitfalls of your generation, Generation Z, that older generations, even those millennials, may not fully understand?
So with Gen Z, it's a mixed bag. I guess every generation has that. Generation Z has never known a life without constant connection and the internet at our fingertips. There has never been a time, even the previous generation, they didn't have smartphones like Gen Z has. Gen Z is the smartphone generation, and I think to a degree we're all a little ADHD because of that. But I think Gen Z is integrated with technology in a way that no other generation is. I mean, before the show started, when I was setting up, everything was ready, everything was perfect, didn't need help. I didn't. I just didn't. And with regards to older generations, they're not. No matter how hard they try, they're not going to be the same because they didn't grow up with it. So I think that's a strength Gen Z has. Gen Z is also, I think, very forward looking. But I think they're pessimistic in the way that they're forward looking. Generation Z, I think, feels that as a whole, the previous generations have left us with a mess that now we have to deal with. And I think the overall outlook for, at least in the West, for Gen Z people is going to be very pessimistic, maybe even nihilistic in general.
This relates a little bit to the education and learning question, and you were again partially private school, partially homeschooled. But how do you have the responsibility of acquiring on your own essential knowledge and skills that a formal education, no matter how good the private school effectively didn't teach you? How do you learn? Do you learn from reading? Do you learn from more modern AI? In the future, we're probably going to have 3D hologram images of President Washington and other leaders that kind of come to life. It's going to be amazing. In some ways, I look forward to it. It'll be intriguing and totally change the dynamic of learning and education. And I think that's going to happen actually sooner rather than later. But do you agree that even as a Generation Z, arguably being the most educated generation, that school doesn't teach you everything? How do you go out and acquire the knowledge you really need to learn to succeed?
Yeah, this is somewhat of a controversial opinion, but I think the universities as a whole, they try, and you do learn a lot of good things at them. But unless you're going, in my view, unless you're going into a STEM field, you probably shouldn't go to university. But because you're going to get in those classes, and I went to business school, I learned a lot in business school, but I didn't learn about the intricacies of finance. I just didn't. That wasn't a thing. We didn't learn about.
Didn't learn about sales.
No, I didn't learn about sales at all. The thing with sales is it's sink or swim. That's just how it is. You're either good at it or you're not.
Everyone could get better.
Everybody can get better, but I feel like everybody's got a cap, right? I don't know where mine is. Maybe it's down here. Maybe it's up here. Who knows? But with education in general, a lot of things that are in the modern world just aren't taught. They don't teach. I took some computer classes at school, and I had a great teacher, but it was pretty surface level still. It wasn't about. It was just about how to use Excel, basically, and a few other things. I learned mostly through YouTube University.
Right.
The younger generation always uses YouTube. The first thing is, if there's a question, we Google it. That's just how Gen Z works. We have a question, we Google it. If we get stuck on something, we Google the problem, and then Google's pretty good at giving us a video that happens to be our problem or close to it. You click on that, you watch it.
Than you now transitioning more to AI models like ChatGPT and others?
I wouldn't know. But I know that kind of thing definitely has potential. I've used it for things before. The nice thing about ChatGPT is and alternatives to it is it's pretty conversational, which I think the older crowd would be good with because Google is pretty finicky. And if you have a particular problem, Google will, you can't just type the whole thing out in Google. You have to Google specific keywords, format your search in a certain way. So I would say that the AI stuff and the Chat GPT is really great for getting older people more integrated with technology because it can be conversational.
Interesting. If you could revamp the education system, what changes would you implement to better prepare our future entrepreneurs, leaders, and simply good citizens and employees?
Whew. Well, you can't learn entrepreneurship in a university. I just don't think you can. I know that might be a controversial take, but I just don't think you can. You need to learn that from on the ground with people that are doing it, maybe through internships. I had a great internship at a company called BurgerFi. It's a local burger chain, and I worked in their office of business development as an internship at school. I learned a lot about business in that internship, much more than I did in the classrooms, just because you're there, you're seeing it, and not everybody is a book learner. Some people are a hands-on learner. So I think stressing internships and real practical on-the-job learning, apprenticeships for other things. If you're going into trades, the apprenticeships are pretty common. Why don't we do that with business?
Makes a lot of sense to me. What are the benefits? And we'll switch directions to investing a little bit. And a little bit of an off-the-wall first question on investing. What are the benefits of concentrating your investments, but arguably that comes with additional risk? We all heard, I believe it was Charlie Munger, I have a intimate basket or eggs in my basket, and I watch that basket very, very closely. We are led to believe that to become rich and get more outsized returns, we need to take greater bets and be more concentrated. Yet there also has been research that has shown there is additional risk, there could be correlation. And how do we balance between having great wealth, taking the right tactical bets, being more concentrated, yet also knowing that we also don't want to lose what we have?
It's a tough one, but really, diversification for the sake of diversification, I think, is a bad way of looking at it. One should focus on things that they're comfortable with, especially at first. I mean, it's most fund managers can't outperform triple Q. They just can't. Especially, and this is a bull market.
I've said it for years, and I get a lot of hate for it.
Imagine in a bear market.
Yep.
Imagine in a bear market. How are these fund managers going to perform in 2 years' time when the market is going down, which I think it'll go down? How are they going to perform? It's been an over 10 years of a bull run, essentially. I am a fan of all your eggs in a couple baskets. I'm not big on the whole diversification thing. I think with it, you're just complicating things. If you want to diversify your portfolio, just throw it in the S&P. Legitimately, if you want diversity, just do the S&P or the NASDAQ, something like that. I don't think you should be, unless you really, really know what you're doing. And sure, if you do, by all means, go ahead. But unless you really, really know what you're doing, I don't think you should be fiddling around with a diverse portfolio.
Yes, the impact on returns and the lack of so-called protection. And there's been a million studies on this. And again, we have like 50 questions. We probably have to move on, but effectively we concur. What macro indicators, Thaddeus, do you look at when you're helping to form your thesis and make decisions, obviously, in investing?
Well, inflation matters, but I'm mostly make investments based off of sentiment and how I perceive the average Joe would look at these investments. I am a big believer that the market is just one big like brain dump essentially of everybody's emotions and thinking, and that's being played out with the little tickers. I do think that with AI making investing decisions, that could change. And they're already doing it, to my knowledge, in some ways. And of course, you have the high frequency trading algorithms, things like that. But the market right now is overwhelmingly human. So I think that one should look at the humans behind the market, because that's just a reflection of the people in it. The market in and of itself, I don't think has actual value to look at.
Interesting. How do you sharpen? It's one of my favorite questions I like to ask smart people. How do you sharpen your critical thinking skills to make better decisions? They're going to be imperfect. You're going to need to iterate, and you're just flat out going to be wrong sometimes. How about that? But how do you get better at critical thinking, especially under stress?
Well, for one, admit when you're wrong when you're wrong. Don't have an ego. An ego doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help the people around you. An ego is pointless. Secondly, though, just meeting people, this goes back to the whole travel thing, meeting people of different backgrounds, different worldviews, with different ideas, and also listening to everybody. If somebody is A, educated on the topic, and B, coming from a good place and means well, I think they should at least be heard. Maybe you don't have to listen to them, but yeah, and take their advice into and actually implement their advice. But you should take their advice into consideration if they're educated on the topic and mean well. You shouldn't shut people down.
Just interested as a follow-up to that, by chance, do you actively play chess or poker?
No, I have a lot of friends that do though. I don't do those games. I don't really have time for it, but I have a lot of respect for the games. I wish I could be good at chess. No, I really do. I wish I could be good at chess because I think it takes a really tactical mind, and you can learn a lot about life from chess. I think chess is a real metaphor for life as a whole.
I believe so. That might mean I have too much time on my hands. Apparently, I'm playing games and smoking cigars. Uh, in an age of overwhelming information, how do you avoid paralysis by analysis and take decisive action?
YOLO. But no, seriously. There, if you have conviction, just do it. I think it was George Patton who said a good enough plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. And I agree. I really agree. Sitting on your hands isn't doing anything. You're just wasting time, potentially wasting money. And of course, time is money. So if you have conviction, go for it. Shoot your shot.
Well, now also living up to our title a little bit today, Thaddeus, what scenarios could lead to Bitcoin plummeting to effectively zero?
Everything is possible. There could be some sort of vulnerability in it that nobody has heard of and nobody's been able to decipher. There could be a like a 0 day in it that is a backdoor exploit. It could be found to be a product of the U.S. government and a psyop all along. It could just plain lose confidence, or there could be a better alternative that comes along that's so much better it blows it out of the water. Nothing lasts forever. So I think Bitcoin eventually will reach zero. I think that'll be well in the future, but eventually, yeah, it's going to happen. Everything does.
Well, you're stealing one of my lines. In theory, everything. Microsoft one day, Meta, it may be hundreds of years. Theoretically, maybe thousands. Everything eventually goes to zero. I agree with you, and I've been an active allocator in Bitcoin. I do not think it's proven to be an inflation hedge. I utilize it for quote-unquote other purposes. And by the way, inflation hedges appear to change all the time. At one point,
Yeah,
they
they
were
do.
gold. At one point, they were farmland, real estate, and all those things. And how about this? Probably a real wild thought. Probably over blocks of 5 to 10 years, the best inflation hedge, investing in the U.S. stock market. That's actually been
No, legitimately, and I
the
agree
best
with you.
inflation
And
hedge.
you don't see people buying shares in the British East India Company, do you? It all goes downhill eventually. Nobody's
Well, man,
investing
you
in
even know
that.
about that. That's impressive. You really did learn.
I'm well
in
read.
school. Grandma was doing
Yeah.
a good job there.
Grandma was amazing.
I would add, I mean, technically going to zero, that's a little bit of a stretch, but it could go to very, very little. Besides what you mentioned, suppose Satoshi is one person. Now, I have thoughts about that I'm going to keep to myself. But let's assume it was legitimately one person, and that person came out. Hey, it's me. I think that would be a big problem. I think moving of the initial Genesis block, backdoor issues, US government, CIA involvement. And how about this one? The governments get really mad. Arguably, it's math, it's freedom of speech, in the US at least. Let's go with the argument that it can't be canceled. That's debatable. But let's go with that. Okay, US government is we're going to tax it 90%, including unrealized capital gains. Now,
Dead
it gets
immediately.
challenged, but suppose the alignment with the president, the Congress, and the Supreme Court, and it loses. There are things that could always go wrong in anything.
I agree.
Which probably relates to, I don't know, a real novel thought. Unless you really got guts, I'll give it to you and it works out well. Maybe don't put 100% of your money into any one thing. How about that?
True. Depends on your conviction, though, no?
That being said, you are an advocate, and we'll get to some more broad crypto things throughout, but of Bitcoin, we don't need to dive deeply into proof of work, into some of the unique analysis about did it have escape velocity from, like many things are kind of, I want to be careful with the words I use, but a little bit pyramid-like until they get quote unquote escape velocity, really anything. So you're advocating or allocating, the better word, to Bitcoin. We don't need to know the percentages and things like that, but are you being tactful based on information and indices and things that you look at? Is it more long-term strategic? What are you doing to adapt your allocation, if anything at all?
Sure. We look at the crypto, Bitcoin and Ethereum. We believe in that. I guess I manage the crypto for the office. I believe in the Bitcoin Ethereum duopoly. I don't see the point in leaving those. Solana bros, sorry. With
hey, I'm
the
one
Bitcoin,
of the Solana bros, kind of.
I know. But yeah, Bitcoin and Ethereum, I think they're great long-term plays for the next 5 to 10 years. I think they're great. Who knows? Some freak thing could happen and it all goes downhill, but we're using it as essentially a higher percentage gain alternative to the stock market with some added risk and volatility involved.
And again, and I think Raoul Pol and others have said this, so I'm not being novel here. How do you mitigate your risk? Well, I got a crazy idea one way. You simply limit your allocation. Now,
Of course.
it depends. You may need to get used to something, form a thesis, get comfortable. You may need it to move a needle, but maybe it is something in a basket that you limit to single digits or maybe early double. So you're mitigating your risk. Now, you can make the argument, what did I say earlier about concentrated risk, that suppose it triples in 2 years, and if you would have had 50% of your capital, you would have had a far greater return. I can't make those decisions for you. Those are internal that you as an investor or a family office are going to have to make. But to ignore Bitcoin because you're old, because you don't quite understand it, you don't really know how a plane flies, but you still get in one. I agree you need to study it more. That's on you. Put in the research, form a thesis, and limit your exposure by effectively you're limiting your allocation. We don't really have the time to get into, is it not your keys, not your Bitcoin, how it could be institutionally custodied. If you're a maxi, again, not your keys, not your Bitcoin, hold the keys. That's a deeper, like one of those 2-hour Bitcoin discussions. I did enough of those in 2021 and 22, but who knows, I may bring back, maybe I'll get Michael Saylor to come back again. I'd love that. That'll be a lot of fun. How about gold? Does it play a part in your or your family's overall portfolio?
Yeah. Everybody knows about gold. I can't say anything novel on it, but yes, we have some. Yes, we invest in it. I am pretty bullish in the next 3 to 6 months on gold personally. I don't want to get into why, but I think you can't go wrong with gold. Gold, historically, it's been great. It's at the very least better than holding cash. So I'm somebody who is not a fan of fiat as a concept. So gold is infinitely better than just having a bunch of cash that's unallocated, ready to go. Gold is better for sure.
Okay, Thaddeus, we're gonna have a little rock and roll back and forth. I don't necessarily disagree. I think I do believe in gold. I do believe in gold coins. I believe in potentially, depending on the scale of the family, offshore storage. And for some of my consultative and members, I talk about areas in Switzerland and other parts of the world. But that being said, sounding a little like Ray Dalio there about cash is trash. Now, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when it was paying under 1%, maybe, but now that it's between 4 and 5%, I have short-term duration, my capital is safe, I have dry powder to move on more exponential opportunities, and I'm getting 4 to 5%. Where in gold, I'm relying on the appreciation, which has been not bad, the last year or so. So I don't know. What would, I'm going to phrase it this way. People never like when I ask this question, by the way, or put it this way. What would cause you to change your mind?
Well, everything in the market, it's my view that everything is only worth as much as everybody thinks it's worth. So if for whatever reason people stopped or institutions started moving away from gold, moving away from that kind of thing and going more into the paper currency route, which I think is disastrous, but if that was the direction they're going, maybe they eventually replace gold with Bitcoin. The crypto guys are always talking about the digital gold narrative. To an extent, I even believe that. But I think that nothing lasts forever. Gold certainly has thousands of years of psychology behind it. And plus, it's pretty and shiny. And I think something in the monkey brain gets triggered by pretty shiny. But if gold stopped being...
Now, it kind of matches my jacket today, too. Maybe I'm a monster gold bug after all, or you all didn't know.
True.
It. You thought I was only in AI and Bitcoin. How wrong were you?
Yeah, I know, right? No, true. So, yeah, that would change my mind.
What excites you most about the current developments in cryptocurrency? And where do you see the greatest opportunities? Or, like you kind of hinted, are you a bit of an OG that believes simply in keeping it simple with Bitcoin and Ethereum?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work in the altcoin space, made a lot of money, lost a lot of money. That's very much the Wild West.
Welcome to the club.
Of course. It's too tempting, and sometimes it's fun to gamble, right? But you see a 40,000% gain in 2 days. Why not, right?
Hey, Goldwood hat was pretty cool for a couple of days.
True, exactly. And of course, there's Dogecoin. Everybody still knows Dogecoin.
Family office world, around the world, would mention a meme coin like dog with hat. Like, come on. Like,
true.
I don't know if I should be scolded for that or should be applauded.
True. With developments in crypto, I think anything that interfaces or tries to connect it with traditional finance is really exciting and also really worrying. It's exciting because that opens up a lot of more avenues for, well, to make money and to use it in creative and interesting ways. Maybe crypto offers things that traditional finance just doesn't. But it's also, to me, a bad thing, because crypto is then going to get more regulated and more regulated. And I'm a bit of a pessimist. A lot of crypto guys think I'm a pessimist because I think that crypto's days are numbered. I'm very much a crypto fan, but 40 years from now, no one's going to be talking about Bitcoin. I really don't think so.
Wow, this is a shocker. I didn't expect this. I'm almost left flabbergasted. For that to happen, either effectively governments are indirectly outlawing it or causing internal issues and causing it to crash, or there's a better alternative.
Yep.
You don't want to flip a coin as to which one. Do you want to give a...
No, I will. I'll tell you the opinion. And sure, this is just my opinion, but governments like regulating things. There are more laws put on the books, hundreds of thousands of more laws just in the States put on the books every year. Crypto is getting more and more regulated. Crypto will just become another part of traditional finance, and it's not going to be this cool, new, sexy thing that it is now. I think that blockchain is amazing technology that's really going to go places. So are NFTs as a concept. That kind of thing is going to really go places. But I don't think there's going to be crypto mania like there was before. I think that the music is slowing, and it's going to stop in probably 20 or 30 years.
Okay, we'll have you back, not in 20 or 30 years, Thaddeus, much sooner, and dive a little deeper into that. But you did mention something. Man, I don't think I've mentioned this three-letter acronym in a long, long time on my podcast and my program. So you brought it up first. Audience, don't believe me. And that's NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Now, the early incarnation was it's digital art. It's kind of hip and cool. It's got a lot of promoters and people behind it. I even got, admittingly, caught up into it, but I understood the technology. Broadly, Web3, blockchain, coupled with the NFT technology and what it could mean for creators, what it could mean to tokenization of real estate. I spoke to someone today that was in Y Combinator, and they developed an incredible DAO real estate platform in the great state of Wyoming. I could almost reach my cowboy hat like my last episode. Gonna have to start to rock that hat more, by the way, with my cigar. Maybe that'll even bring my audience numbers up. We'll see. Really interesting things happen. So NFTs is digital art. That probably doesn't look so promising at the moment, but NFTs coupled with the broad aspect of Web3, upcoming social tokens, and blockchain. Again, man, who else in the family office world is talking about this stuff? You all thought I was crazy 3 or 4 years ago. For a couple of months in 2022, a lot of you looked right, but I ended up being more right, I guess you could say, in the long run. So talk a little bit about that more technology and other aspects of NFTs that 99% of my audience is not going to be as familiar with.
Sure, I don't want to go over anybody's heads, but NFTs, non-fungible tokens, they have a lot of potential from a security standpoint. They have a lot of potential from a creative standpoint, like you mentioned. Copyright, that could be revolutionized by NFT. Real estate, titles, and things like that. Blockchain, all of that isn't going anywhere. That technology is definitely here to stay. Even if you're a crypto pessimist, even if you think Bitcoin's going to zero, valid viewpoint. But if you think that blockchain is going away and NFTs are going away, you're actually insane.
There you go. Give it to him. Give it to him there, Thaddeus. Boy, let's talk about something else that is probably 3x more trendy than even crypto was a couple of years ago. How are you looking at and investing in AI? And do you believe it will make a significant impact? I think it's pretty obvious on the economy.
Yeah. AI is already revolutionizing every industry, every single one. I was reading up on how AI is revolutionizing farming because it's allowing farmers to be more precise in where they spray the pesticides, and it's saving them a lot of money and better for the environment too. AI, I think, is going to absolutely gut middle management, and because you'll always need somebody to mine the coal, you'll need somebody to flip the burgers, you're going to need somebody to move the boxes, but and until the robots get good enough for that, it's going to have to be the good old Mark I arms. But when it comes to middle management, AI is going to replace you. They just will. And C-suite executives are going to be happy because their costs will go down substantially.
Yes, I mean, this is, again, a subject. I've done 4 podcasts, multiple with Dr. Craig Kaplan, totaling 5+ hours this summer. Go to @FamilyOffice or @FamilyOffice TV on YouTube. Either one, it's all there. I'm active mainly actually in the public sector, but also some private deals that I do in AI. And yes, I guess you could say arguably the last 2 weeks hasn't been so great. I'm not looking at it that tactfully every hour. I'm not a day trader. I'm looking at it more from my long-term thesis. Dr. Kaplan and I really went pretty deep on that. I completely agree with you. As does, the current CEO of Google stated, I think it's a little over the top, but he stated it'll be more impactful than electricity and fire. Elon Musk said something like 800x more powerful in 4 years. Others say it's exponentially growing at 10x a year. Ray Kurzweil, the iconic futurist, who I also had on this summer, go to my platforms. Okay, it was only 10 minutes, but hey, 10 minutes is better than nothing. With the legend himself, basically, there's too many forces at work. Maybe the energy demands can't keep up. Regulatory issues could be a bit of a challenge, but everything is changing so rapidly. And that's part of my concern, and will lead into my next question broadly about the future of family offices and the future in general. Now, this could lead to issues with job loss that you noted, maybe the impact or utilization of UBI, which we won't get into, but other podcasts I have will. I have another alternative that I think is better from more of a libertarian perspective and people having both personal responsibility and being motivated. But adding on to what you said, if you, even as a C-level executive, are making decisions based on historical data, which really think about it, actually kind of many of you are, you cannot do it as well or nowhere near as quick as AI. It is going to replace you. Actually, artists and creatives may be a little safe for a while. My God, I think a barber, a hairdresser is probably safe for decades. So like who would have thought it, how the impact and changes are different than we think. And to not form a thesis, to not invest, to not have these discussions inside your family office, like what is wrong with you? Like that you are completely wrong. Why don't, if you're not, and no, you just getting soft allocations through broad exposure long only in the market, I could argue may not be enough. So related to that question or comment, question prior, then comment, and I noted, how do you envision the world changing besides apparently crypto disappearing in 20 to 40 years or being at a different perspective? How do you picture probably the AI aspect changing the world, employment, everything as we know it, not in 50 or 100 years, closer to 10 to 20 years?
You're talking specifically about like a geopolitical standpoint or?
Any direction how you want to read into it.
Okay, sure. I see, at least in the West, from a geopolitical standpoint, more regulation, less freedom for the average Joe. I don't want to be too doom and gloom, but it's already starting to look a little 1984-ish. It's getting worse by the day, if you unless there's some radical changes there. I mean, the UK has jailed a man for 18 months for saying something, pessimistic towards the immigrants, and that I think is an overstep there. Free speech, right?
And
with
since I'm an extreme libertarian, you got me going on that one, Thaddeus. So hold on to that thought. But I will add to it, there's been threats to American citizens by the UK of we're going to come and get you for comments that you're making on social media. How dare you comment about this or that? It's unbelievable. Now, is it a little comical? Yes. But could there be a future in 10 or 20 years, depending on who our political leaders are, where imagine that actually is happening? Now,
sure,
I'm really not that concerned. My butt's going to be in Wyoming. I'll be a little careful how I state this. I have not only good protections from my state, from my neighbors. You come and try to get me and see what happens to you.
Yeah, try it. Yeah. No, I think that's anybody rational who looks at the world is going to see that the winds are moving in a direction that's not exactly pro-freedom, pro-free speech. I'm a huge proponent of free speech. I think people have the right to be horrible people, and I think people have the right to be good people based off of what they say, and you should take them at that. You shouldn't try to regulate speech. There's a meme among the Gen Z crowd where it's like your electric car won't start because the government didn't like what you said on Twitter and your social credit score dropped too low. So now your electric car is not going to start and you won't go to work. I think there's some truth to that. I think that's the way things are going. Of course, that's an extreme example, but we're seeing bits and pieces of that right now.
Is related to that and the prior question and your belief that in time, Bitcoin and others may play a far less role. Do you think part of that, and we may be getting a little deep for an audience that is not arguably overly fluid broadly in areas relative to digital and crypto, the advent of central bank digital currencies and the opportunity for the government to have complete control? You hinted at it. Your car doesn't start. You brought 2 pounds of meat this month. Well, that's contributing to climate change. That's your cap. And we're cutting off your wallet. We don't like what we say. We're cutting off your wallet. And in your wallet, digital wallet is effectively everything. Yep. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't like the sound of any of that, any of it. And basically, it's kind of what China kind of does now. So is that what you want to have here? Is that the direction that you're talking about? That things are slowly, it's like that frog in boiling water, slowly trending in those negative directions.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Central bank digital currency is the worst thing that could possibly happen to this country.
The
No
worst,
matter what.
worst.
Nuclear war is better than central bank digital currency. Um, but yeah, it's going to mean that the government could monitor every single transaction, take people's money at will, um, penalize you arbitrarily for things that for doing things the government might not like, discriminate against you, force ration with your purchasing. In every single way, it's only bad. I don't know how anybody can, in good faith, argue for central bank digital currency. I suppose there's the angle of it would cut down on crime. There's that, but the crime would just use something else. They would use another medium of exchange. Maybe it's crypto. Maybe it's something else, but I think you're just going to regulate good people into having more miserable lives.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a full 2 hour program about this. That's hopefully enough to scare people if they don't know to do research. And one of the common things that I say is think for yourself. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Thaddeus is wrong. But how about you hear various perspectives? You do your own research. You understand the conflicts of where you're hearing it from. Oh, but my college professor. Well, you're a college professor. What the hell have they done? And two, where's their conflicts? Because apparently they're all obvious and all over the place and skewed. And what are you
And
reading?
for the record, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong with my pessimistic outlook. I really do. I don't want to be right.
So do I. And this again comes back to not only think for yourself, but be proactive, take a decision. And if you care about continuity, there's a reason why my private club for 30 founders is called SFO Continuity, because it is about the continuity of the family generation after generation, your community, our society, our country, and effectively the world. Be proactive, take action, help to educate people, get out of your comfort zone. And these are things that I think as family office people, as principals, executives, and thought leaders, from our role, I think that we have an obligation to do. Boy, talk about a quick change of direction. When do you think, it's a weird way of phrasing it, but when do you think that fusion energy can become a reality and the impact, the immediate impact that would have on the global economy?
Okay, so first, when there's a joke in fusion and the crowd that follows fusion. Fusion is 10 years away, and they've been saying that since the 50s. So it very well could come about next week. There already are self-sustaining fusion reactions that have been done that generate more power than you put in. That has happened. The question is utilizing that and harnessing that in an economical way. They already exist. It already happens. I mean, if you can look outside, the sun is a fusion reactor. They exist. It's just a question of getting that power out of it in an economically viable way and a practical way. So there's those two issues to overcome, but I think we're pretty close. If I had to throw a number out, less than 20 years. And whoever gets fusion first, whichever country that is, right now the leaders are China and the US, in that order, is going to have a major advantage because basically every problem will be solved by a fusion. The environmental problem will be solved by fusion because you can just rip the CO2 out of the atmosphere. You can just do that if you have unlimited power. Computing won't be an issue because you can just fill a state the size of Wyoming with computers and it won't be a problem to power it or cool it because you have power. Fusion solves every single problem. I think that should be more of a national and geopolitical priority to get fusion there because it's close.
100%. And potentially as a family office, besides political action and awareness that we could have an impact and make that happen. Besides that, from simply a greed perspective of I want to make money, are there anything that you're seeing from an investing perspective, a public company, a SPAC, anything that you're coming across in private deals that is getting your attention?
With regards to fusion,
Yes.
Yeah, not so much. I'll be frank, I'm not in that space. I know some people that are, though. I'll probably ask them, see what they say. Uh, this fusion, though, there are a number of companies in the states that are working on it. Some are better than others. I can't name any off the top of my head, but Google will tell you. And I would say investing even a small amount in any of those top fusion companies is probably a good bet, because as soon as one of them cracks it, it doesn't matter that you lost money in the others. You're going to make such a massive gain because it's such revolutionary technology. Fusion really is like a new industrial revolution, just like AI. And we're going to need more power to power all the AI stuff.
100%. You actually gave me an idea for my members. I'm going to put together proprietary content and opportunities in Fusion, and I hope we make like whatever a 10,000 to 1 return on it. So members, stay tuned. That's going to be one of my fall projects. I wrote it down. I am not going to forget. I'm going to actually come back to that point, not necessarily about Fusion, but about membership and opportunity in a little while. But before I get there, is inflation. Now, ironically, as I'm talking to myself about this, I was going to say inflation, of course, is a problem. Of course, it's individualized on the person. If I'm buying assets that are rapidly increasing in value, if I'm eating a certain kind of whatever, 3 filet mignons a day, probably my inflation is not 4%. So I think there's a number of factors. Does printing money contribute? Of course. But I do think there's other factors, effectively supply and demand within a given market infrastructure. And we just kind of hinted at one in fusion, energy. Imagine if there is fusion, what that will do to global productivity, what it potentially could do to our deficit in a positive way. Energy cost. The AI would boom even so much more. That potentially could get us out of a rut that we're in if we don't mess it up, which who knows, a coin flip again, 50-50. But broadly speaking, I got a little off track there. Do you have an opinion about inflation? And if you want to chime into, in your perspective, what's a leading driver of it?
Government negligence. Full stop. The Federal Reserve is and government spending. I do think your argument has some credence that energy costs, supply and demand definitely plays a factor. I agree with you, but I would say the single biggest and most overwhelming factor is monetary policy. Because you can look throughout history. I don't remember the dynasty. One of the Chinese dynasties, they transitioned early to fiat currency, printed a bunch of money to pay for these big projects and infrastructure and everything, and then it all blew up in their face. It just happened. I'd have to find which one. But Spain also, I think it was the 1500s, did the same thing, and they lost half their empire over the economic collapse that ensued. So I think monetary policy is the single biggest driver of inflation.
Okay. Relative to what we spoke about on advancements in Bitcoin, in AI, in fusion energy, I'll kind of give a little bit of a comment about it because there's going to be an entrenchment, including in our government and powers that be that have influence politically, that are not going to like any of it. Banks don't really like Bitcoin. Taxis don't really like Uber. Hotels don't like Airbnb. Cinemas don't like Netflix. 9-to-5ers don't like remote work. Well, maybe neither do I, but besides that, innovation isn't always liked, and it's entrenched, including in government. And that's probably one of the biggest impediments and challenges that we're going to have moving forward. Any opinion on that, Thaddeus?
No, I agree. I feel like the new innovation it always starts off worse than the best of the old. That's just fact. And then it has to grow under a lot of pressure and a lot of competition with the entrenched old guard, and then it has to brutally kill it. And that's how it takes over. It really does. It changes it messy. Changes messy. Progress is messy. It's never a seamless, easy transition. You're gonna get that. That's just life. That's just humans.
Okay, we got about the final 30, 35 minutes to go. It's going to be a lot of fun. I will take a moment for our sponsor to give a 1-minute read, and that sponsor is me. It's Angelo Robles. Go And thank you, Thaddeus. Go and subscribe. It's free to my newer, not the Angelo Robles, that's old, Angelo Robles podcast on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, at least by tomorrow. Rumble, again, getting a little new and modern, and that's going to be an interesting platform for me. Obviously, my YouTube's at Family Office and Family Office TV. I think my content is deep, the most cutting edge, probably the most controversial. Am I the most liked person in the community? No, if anything, I'm probably the most disliked. I don't care. I care about my family. I care about the relationships that I have, and I care about my country. And I'm not afraid to talk about geopolitics, economics, macro, and tie this into investing in family offices. Of course, I'm going to be wrong sometimes. And I've been humbled before, but I like to throw myself out there, warts and all, and hopefully give it my all in my heart and what competency that I happen to have after decades, and hopefully able to provide value. Now, those of you that really want the unvarnished truth and the private information, you got to join what I built at SFO Continuity. You go to angelorobles.com and you simply learn more. I have room for a couple of more founding members. I have incredible founding members so far. I've been very fortunate, and some of the investment opportunities that I've gotten to come across that I never would have had insight to. So the networking, the peer-to-peer, the no sponsor, no vendors. When I invite them for their content, it's not because they're paying, it's because I think they could provide value and we could grill the hell out of them. That's why. And these are intimate, often breakfast meetings and lunches, very, very small. I've been there and done that with larger events. I don't think that's going to be me moving forward. I like the intimacy. I like the private Zooms. I like the proprietary digital content and the ability to be also introduced to people like Thaddeus and others as part of our private club. And I happen to be very active in one of the areas besides Puerto Rico, where I'm somewhat active, but also in Palm Beach, where Thaddeus is also familiar with, especially come winter season. So if you want to be part of something special and really have incredible resources and access for, I think, a very reasonable founding member pricing, and I'm wickedly busy this summer, especially late summer and September. Wait till you see my agenda. It is jam-packed and incredible content, especially for my members. So go to angelorobles.com and simply learn more. I do not care about being liked. I don't need to be likable. You could dislike me for my beard. I don't know what it is, that I smoke cigars. Do I provide valuable content that is useful, that you can take action on? And in my network is incredible people that you could meet. That's all that matters, nothing else. Okay, let's move on. On that very warm and fuzzy note, which stocks are you most bullish on? And potentially, if you wanted to give us one or two, why to you they make compelling investments?
Well, there's two ways of looking at it. Any of the AI firms, I think NVIDIA especially is a hard one to miss. Anything that Elon Musk touches also turns to gold. I'm of that opinion. I'm also very bullish on any kind of defense manufacturer, because I predict turmoil and war this century. And if you just look since the war in Ukraine started, Lockheed Martin's up like don't quote me on this, but it's like 10% or something. And Rheinmetall over in Germany is up 50%. It's just since the war has escalated. So I think defense manufacturers are definitely worth looking at.
Yes, I mean, I'll add a little bit to it. I kind of like to ask this question as well. Since 2004, what stock has performed better, Domino's or Google, or AKA Alphabet? I wouldn't be asking that if the answer barely wasn't Domino's. So you just don't know. What has done great in the last year? Abercrombie and Fitch. What has done incredibly great, even though I do scratch my head as to why? Dick's Sporting Goods. Like, you don't know. You got to put in the work. And that's what me and my members do, and sharing these ideas and debating them and going back and forth. I completely agree on AI. I completely agree on Elon. And I know the news about Samsung and Toyota and the 9-minute charge on 600 miles. And I hope that's true. That's awesome. In 2027, we'll see. I don't know, betting against Elon, the fact that they're integrated in robotaxi, in robotics with what they're doing, with now XAI and the data and information they got, to consider Tesla to be limited to being a car company, you are very, very wrong. And then you also look
Yeah.
at Microsoft that has great leadership. You look at still what Google is and can be moving forward, NVIDIA, Meta, and Zuck. You going to bet against Zuck long term? You think that's going to be a good move? Probably not. So I think there's lots of opportunities in the public markets, and I mean lots of them. So, and this is a topic that publicly, actually, I do have a guest coming on. He's wickedly smart in September. I think it's September 17th on basically, we're going to review kind of our top 10 stock picks and do a little bit of a deep dive into each of them, going from 10 to 1. How about that? That'll be a lot of fun. What triggers you to change your mind, Thaddeus, on an investment? And how do you handle cognitive dissonance in decision making?
I'm very pragmatic. My whole family is. If something's not working out, we're going to cut our losses. I've lost way more money in thinking I should get out and then not for whatever reason than I would have if I had gotten out and missed out on some freak gain. No, I've held meme coins to zero. I have. I'll be ashamed to admit it. I've held meme coins to zero when I should have sold. It's you can't have the sunk cost fallacy in your mind. You always have to remember that you need to get out if things look bad, if things go south. And that, I think, has a lot to do with your personal risk tolerance as well. We're pretty tolerant of risk in my family office. We don't really... we're not those people that just buy treasury bonds. No shade on those people, but that's not us. And, of course, being a crypto guy, I'm big into risk and all that, but you also got to know when to cut your losses and walk away. And there's no shame in admitting you're wrong. If anything, you only learn when you make a mistake.
Is it a bigger risk investing in, say, let's call it cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, etc., or not investing them at all? Of course, how I phrase that, the answer is, to me, you mitigate your risk by your allocation. Not investing in them is foolish. But that's me. You may have a different perspective.
Sure. I think, I'm of course biased, but I think that crypto is a good investment. I think Bitcoin and Ethereum especially are good. Even Solana's good. And I know I've talked bad about it, but I think Solana still has a lot of potential as well. You have to always weigh your pros and cons. It goes back to risk tolerance, some of it, and also you have to weigh your pros and cons of what you're capable of doing, what you think you're good at as an investor as well. There's no shame in saying this is above my head, and this is where you and I are going to differ. But there's no shame in saying I don't understand that crypto stuff. I'm not going to get involved. I don't think that is a good way of looking at it, but I don't think that's necessarily bad either. There's plenty of good investments in traditional finance, venture capital, etc. The list goes on. Crypto is just the hot, sexy thing right now, and I think there's some tulip mania in that.
We could go on and on about the next subject, and I probably do need to dedicate 2 hours with it on a macro person on China, and I know you have strong opinions. So I'm going to ask this question more broad-based initially. We're probably at the stage now with 10 more questions to go where we'll keep it a little bit rapid fire. But what are your thoughts on China's rise, and how should investors prepare for potential shifts in global power dynamics? You can answer that from both the geopolitical perspective, part one, and if you want, an investing perspective, part two.
Well, yeah, so part one, geopolitical. I see China as going, and this is a controversial view, I see China as probably not going to be as strong as everybody thinks it's going to be. I think China fakes a lot of their numbers. I mean, that's just fact. They fake a lot of their numbers. China has a lot of internal strife. I just saw on the news today, of course, that there's riots in China protesting something that the Communist Party did. I see China as very likely, of course, nothing's a certainty, but very likely to go more inwards, as is their traditional way. I think that's a cultural thing. And I'm not so concerned of them from a geopolitical standpoint in the long term. I think they're going to have to focus inwards, as they always do historically, and fix themselves before coming back on the world stage again. I think this was a good effort, though. Now, from an investing standpoint, friendshoring, get the hell out of China. If you want to, there's better markets if you're in there. Vietnam, of course, is growing massively. Thailand, even Myanmar before the war was growing well. There's plenty of markets other than China for you to get into. If you really want to get into emerging markets or manufacturing, there's other countries to manufacture in. Don't be married to China just because everybody's been in China.
And my next question relates to another part of the world with conflict, and you could also answer it geopolitically, one is part one, and if you want, from the investing perspective, what are your views on the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and how do you see it evolving and the impact on Europe and the world?
Sure, asking only tough questions.
Welcome to the Angelo Robles podcast. What can I say?
Of course. So Russia and Ukraine, they're both heavily corrupt countries. I'm not particularly sure why we're funding Ukraine's war. I think that anybody who legitimately thinks that Russia is a threat to NATO is just wrong. Russia can't even beat Ukraine. You think they're going to take on NATO? The Russians are pragmatic. They're just trying to take something they think they can get, and if it weren't for the massive Western response, which I don't think anybody could have predicted, I certainly didn't, this war would have been over in the first few weeks. Russia's initial attack in Kiev and Gostomel Airport with their VDV airborne forces nearly won the war day one. So this isn't going to, according to Russia's plan. They saw Ukraine as an easy win, and thanks to some good Ukrainian fighting, and of course a lot of Western aid and money and equipment and training, this has turned into something really a monster that it shouldn't have been. From an investing standpoint, the only real lesson that I learned from Ukraine was be willing to look at alternative investments and things you never would have thought of before. There was a friend of mine who, the moment that this war escalated from just a border conflict in Donetsk and Lugansk to an actual proper shooting war with the real Russians, they took a look at the grain market and the phosphorus market, and they made some choice investments there, which paid off massively because, of course, Ukraine is a huge grain exporter, or was a huge grain exporter, and a lot of the world, particularly the third world, relies on imported food. So don't be married to one particular investment. If you know a country is strong on the world stage in a certain resource or something, and something happens to that country, be prepared for the cascade to happen. That's all.
And it brings in a little bit of China and Russia that we just discussed, and that's going to be the BRICS, into my next question. What do you predict will happen to the US dollar as global economic conditions shift, the rise of the BRICS, plus potentially Saudi Arabia and others, the fact that we are the world reserve currency, but the ratio and percentage of use of the US dollar globally in transactions is down a little bit from a couple of years ago, down a little bit more from 10, 15 years ago. So yeah, Bretton Woods, 1944 or whatever, 45, things are changing. Nothing lasts forever. I don't think we're going to lose world reserve currency anytime soon, but the trends are not necessarily in a positive direction.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that the more the United States messes with their and plays with the fact that they're the world reserve currency, the Russian sanctions, I think, was a big driving factor. Not just because all the Russians couldn't transact in the dollar anymore, or it was difficult for them to, but also that any other country that maybe was more sympathetic to Russia or more at odds with the Western Pax Americana global system, the global American empire, it would look more seriously at alternatives after what happened there. I don't think that the BRICS currency is going to go anywhere. I think that all those countries hate each other and just pretend to like each other because they're all like, kind of against America, kind of. Um, I don't really think that that's going to go anywhere, but the euro is a growing alternative. The yuan is a growing alternative. I think we're going in that direction long term. I wouldn't be worried in the short term, though, unless America decides to, and the U.S. government decides to do something very drastic with their policy on the dollar.
In changing directions, but we did speak about the future. We spoke about cryptocurrency, about AI, about fusion energy, uh, longevity, health, biotech. So when I think of why is CRISPR and AI powered DNA editing effectively so important? What's going to be the impact from a human and societal perspective? And potentially, again, I do got to take it back to the family office world. Where do the opportunities potentially lie in investing?
Sure. Um, CRISPR and other kinds of AI powered DNA editing, it's really speeding up the process like leaps and bounds, and also integrating it in a way that it wasn't integrated before, because the AI is at multiple different, sometimes it's the same AI working in different research centers and whatever, and it's sharing information, cross-referencing with what it already knows. It's making things a lot faster, a lot better. I think longevity in the longevity space, that's a big thing. That's something that we're looking at. Just investing in longevity, biotech in general. I think there are a lot of ethical concerns with certain technologies. Granted, there are ethical concerns with everything, right? There's ethical concerns with driving cars, but the idea of in some dystopian potential future where you're having gene edited children and potentially a new avenue for there to be racism versus you have the gene edited people versus the non gene edited people like Gattaca. It's not exactly going to be it's not exactly perfect. It's not all sunshine and butterflies and rainbows.
Are we witnessing a psychological operation targeting our youth and youth in the West specifically via social media and big tech? And what are the implications? I could mention TikTok, how it's very different in China than it is here. It obviously skews one way of the political aisle way more than the other, and that is impactful on impressionable and not fully developed, even you, young man, not till we're like 25 to 27, our minds. So
Yeah.
is this imaginary and I'm raising a concern that is simply not there? Or are these things that again, would benefit obviously from more balance and the fact that there are psychological operations, aka psyops, going on against us?
Sure. If you want to get somewhat conspiratorial, but it's not even it's conspiracy. The CIA has flat out admitted to doing many psyops and many worse things to even U.S. citizens. So anything is possible. Nothing can be ruled out. I'm not in the camp that thinks that Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and everything is all some big psyop. I do think the government has sway. I think the government is able to censor things. I'm more worried about censorship and propaganda than anything, than some sort of weakening the minds of us youngins. I think it was troubling that when some events took place in Australia, that the Australian government talked to Twitter, and I guess X now, and had X censor things about that event because they were worried it would cause rioting and uproar and whatever. And then they also insisted that those events be censored globally, which of course Elon did not oblige, but he did censor it within Australia. So I think the internet is going to become less of an open free speech space, and is definitely going to become more isolated. There's going to be China. There's already China's internet versus the rest of the world. It's going to be America's internet, Britain's internet, Australia's internet. Everything's going to have their own somewhat different, slightly changed, censored, propagandized internets.
Yes, and that's sad. And we could think back a couple of months ago when further AI launched and ended up being incredibly woke. I'm not going to mention the name of the company or companies. So this all could be manipulated, which is a concern until it becomes, and that potentially one day could be the value of Web3, which is decentralized, which means there's not a single point of failure. Now, There's things that could go wrong and be manipulated there as well. But this goes back to the bigger point of what information is coming into you that is causing you to make your decision. So thinking for yourself is great, but what inputs are you taking to make a decision to think for yourself? Will the future, this relates to some of the prior questions, will the future single family office, I predicted a couple of years ago when crypto was hyper hot, that larger scale family offices under the auspice of a CIO would have crypto dedicated experts, which in theory seem to make sense because of the potential, which probably still is now, for exponential returns. Could there be an AI expert? Could there be a biotech expert? Admittingly, this takes more scale from a family office's side, but could you see a future where family offices get very, very tactical and they bring in-house specific talent?
Sure, yeah, that happens already in any industry. It's just a matter of money, right? If you have the money and the will and the practicality to pay these people for their expertise, I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of really brilliant people in crypto. I guess every field, but crypto, AI. There is going to be an AI expert. There is going to be a crypto expert. There already are crypto experts, and I'm sure there already are AI experts. I think it's only a matter of time till they enter the family office space. It'll trickle from other industries. I wonder how more traditional finance institutions are looking at. I wonder if banks have on payroll crypto and AI investment strategy experts, if hedge funds have that. Because if they do, then it'll be in family offices in enough time.
Yeah, assuming family offices are going to pay properly. Banks already have them relative to crypto. I've worked with one or two families over the years on looking more into actively developing an internal, let's call it, quote unquote, really more Web3 blockchain and crypto team. So yes, I completely concur, but family offices can be a little slow. They're not always the most revolutionary. All things I try to work on with them, but sometimes they're a little slow to adjust, Thaddeus. Is avoiding foolish mistakes more important than being smart or being brilliant in the field of investing?
Yes. As simple as yes. I think it was Warren Buffett who even said that, or something to that effect.
You got it.
It's more important not to lose than it is to win. It really is. And because most people, even the really educated people, make mistakes all the time. So just try to limit your downside, and you're going to do way better than the majority of people. Chasing after gains is not as good as limiting your downside.
Which relates a little bit to John Folds, who stated or warned that high intelligence can subvert the will to act. And how do you stay decisive in a world full of possibilities? Kind of rephrased a little bit. Sometimes having an ultra high IQ, balancing lots of different ideas, but not forming a decision. You almost got too much going on up there. You develop an ego, a word that you don't like, but that could happen with the Mensa types that are very smart, and a lack of other proper inputs coming in, and either your paralysis by analysis or your decisions that you think with more and more information coming in are going to be more tactful and correct. That does not always work out that way.
Yeah, paralysis by analysis. To me, it's just that boils down to overthinking. That's all it really is. And you have to just make a call. Inaction is worse than in many cases than a bad action. You don't want to be that person who's left behind. You don't want to miss the boat. Obviously, research everything. Take every opportunity. That's something we do at my office. We look at everything. We don't care what sector it's in. We don't care who's running it. We will look at it and at least see. I think you need to be outwardly looking and see what's out there for sure. But you got to make a call. You got to pick from the best. You can't just sit there on your hands waiting for something better to come along, because there always will be something better. Always. So just make a call if you're happy with it.
Is Israel losing the PR battle, especially among the global youth? And what could be the long-term implications?
Sure. Um, Definitely. I can't speak for the rest of the world, but from the West, yes, I think so. I think Israel is losing, certainly in the Arab world, but also in the West, they're losing the PR war. Um, I'm more sympathetic towards Israel, I will say that, but I think that there are certain things that they need to change if they want to stop being seen as troublemakers. They're getting a reputation almost like North Korea on the world stage, where they are seen as this belligerent power. Whether it's true or not, that's perception matters. And yeah, I think they're definitely losing the PR war.
Back a little bit to money printing. I mean, there's nothing positive that I could really say about it as well. But imagine a world where the governments were printing money and putting it into major projects that lead to enhanced productivity. Meaning, imagine if they put everything, well, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but a real lot into fusion energy, into AI. Might that actually be good? Or we're thinking the government's going to be entrepreneurial and the government's always going to do the right thing. That probably doesn't sound like that's going to happen or such a good idea.
Yeah, that's my main concern with it. Government wastage and inefficiency is a tale as old as time, as well as corruption. That doesn't even factor in corruption. Um, I think that the government has made some great mega projects. The interstate highway system, that's amazing. It cost the taxpayers billions and trillions, but it has absolutely paid off and been a net positive for the U.S. economy. But it's not every project that's going to be like that, and I don't think you should necessarily take on mountains of debt that you printed in order to do that. I think there's a time and a place for that. You should evaluate the project. I'm not against it in concept, but it has to be done right, and I don't really have the faith in the current U.S. federal government to do that.
Given the fact that we effectively outsource chip making primarily to Taiwan, the concern is China and Taiwan. And as much as we have angst with China, trust me, a big issue, we also have a fair amount that's manufactured there, mutual trade. This is complicated. Now, what is China going to do in Taiwan? Are they going to take advantage the week of the election? Could things get weird? And I don't think I hear people talk about, well, is it really that bad? And what happens if chip production gets delayed? It's really that bad. Yes, we are unprepared. But enough about my opinion. And I didn't even offer a solution because there really is no good one for me to give. What is your perspective about that, which ties in the US, China, and Taiwan?
Yeah, so the U.S. China Taiwan issue. I don't think China will be dumb enough to do it. I don't, unless internal political factors forced them to, like what happened with Argentina and the Falklands War, where they were put under pressure politically and they used it as a distraction. And if they won a potential way to gain a lot of positivity of the current regime, that's the only scenario where I see them doing it. I think the Chinese aren't stupid. And I think they realize that any shooting war with the US would be a disaster for their economy and the whole globe. And I also think that with how the world is dependent on Taiwanese chip production, we saw during COVID, mere delays were causing the whole economy to crumble with the delays in chips. Cars couldn't get made, everything couldn't get made because of just plain delays. Imagine if that stops. Imagine if the factories get bombed. Imagine if there's tanks rolling down the streets outside. Yeah, not great. And also, hypothetically, if the Taiwanese are losing to the Chinese, their most hated enemy, do you think that they wouldn't just blow it up? Of course they would. Of course they would. They would scorched earth it rather than give the chip production to the Chinese. So that would set the world back decades, essentially, and crater the world economy. I really don't think China would do it. I hope not.
It relates a little bit to AI, and it came out, I think, in the last week. What are your thoughts on the development of the advancement in humanoid robots like the Figure 2 and potentially the role of robotics? And this relates to employment. And this relates to the future. This relates to military. This kind of relates to everything.
Sure.
That humanoid robot from that O2 company, it looked a little scary. That's one thing. It looked a
Yeah.
little ominous, but I don't know. Maybe they're hyping up the media, but it was a little bit impressive in terms of what it's able to do at the moment.
Sure. Um, Whether it can do the things that they claim at the moment, I think is irrelevant because it is getting there. It will be there soon, if it isn't already. Um, Humanoid robots are coming. They are here to stay. They're only going to get more prevalent. Uh, I think it's going to revolutionize a bunch of different things. Uh, it depends. Everything depends. Certainly, if we talk at the military angle, if you can have a robot soldier in some far future, then maybe even near future, then I think countries are going to be more likely to conduct shooting wars against each other because they don't have the negative press of bodies coming back home. And they also have plausible deniability if war crimes happen because it was the robot, they went rogue. So I think that's a potential thing from a military standpoint. From a economic standpoint, you need a source of cheap labor. You just do. That drives an economy. America has, since its inception, been built on cheap labor. Of course, that labor has changed forms over the years. But this could be the new cheap labor for countries that maybe demographically aren't in a good place. Smaller population countries, Iceland, Sweden, things like that. Maybe humanoid robots fulfilling a bunch of tasks could add a lot of economic value.
Well, yes, as we have aging populations, not as much children, challenges in energy and GP in so many different areas, healthcare, etc. It's whether you like it or not to say that we're just going to stop and roll back the clock. Oh my God, unless there's nuclear war or something terrible, that's just not realistic. That's just not going to happen. And as a family office, have a positive impact from your community, society, your country, and the world, and look at it also from a hedging and investing perspective, because this is just the reality. Look at the Magnificent Seven, look at others. There's just so much going on. It is a scary but an interesting time to be on Earth. Thaddeus, what could I say? This has been effectively 2 hours. It's flew by. It's been a lot of fun, very insightful. There are most guests, practically all that I'd have on, and they have newsletters and Substacks and LinkedIn and whatever, 300,000 followers here or there. You're a little off the grid, but I'll give you a chance if you wanted to interact or you're setting something up where you're going to be sharing information. Maybe it's one of your social media accounts. Maybe it's a private yet contained email. Is there any way that people could learn more about you if you so desire?
Yeah, I like to be, sorry to everybody, but I like to be very low key under the radar. But I will say, if anybody would like to reach out, you can reach me at tcook@sunburstventures.net. That's that's the family office email. You can feel free to email me and reach out. That's again, tcook@sunburstventures.net, but I'm not on LinkedIn. Not on social media. I really like keeping a low profile. I'm here because I like the show and I really like Angelo and thought it would be awesome to have a conversation here on the show. I just like talking to this guy, so that's why I'm on the show.
Well, you're so great. And, certainly I've really enjoyed knowing your mom, having a chance to meet you really just relatively recently this summer, interacting today. I appreciate your very kind words and the fact that you're so private and under the radar. Not even, my God, a Gen Z who's not really on social media. Yet you come on for this 2-hour grilling that I'm going to distribute all around the world.
Tough questions. Tough questions. You didn't give me any softies either.
I
appreciate it.
I take pride in my homework and the work that I do. I'm passionate. I'm obsessed, a word that I do like to use. I think to be successful, and I know others talk about work-life balance, and maybe they could do something that I can't, and I am jealous of them. To me, to be great at what I do, to strive for that, I need to be obsessed, and I need to really give it along a course with my faith and my family, everything that I got. Maybe because I'm just simply not that smart enough. So I need to be able to do that. But I do appreciate your kind words. I kind of already gave my AngeloRobles.com pitch before. Follow me on all my socials, and now Angelo Robles Podcast on the traditional podcasting platform. So if you're doing a long drive and don't want to have YouTube be distracting, that's helpful. Find me on Rumble. I'm at Family Office, I guess, there. So, yay, I got that great handle, like I do on X, by the way, and I do on at least one of my core YouTube platforms. And my website at angelorobles.com will be very, very helpful from a membership and a more personal, interactive perspective in terms of with me. It's been an incredibly active summer. The pedal is still on the metal, lots going on, and I got a crazy September and a lot of travel coming up more so in the mid to late fall, including hopefully back to Europe. So I'm being active, very busy, jump on board to what we're doing. I appreciate all of you. I'm open to suggestions. A couple of people of some prominence did also reach out to me from debating perspectives on investing, on politics, geopolitics, about the future of the family office. So hopefully September in the fall, more to come on that. I hope you're enjoying the content. Always look to get better. Appreciate your feedback. Many of you said my mic and my speakers were horrific, so I changed it. Hopefully this is better at an improvement. So shockingly, I do listen just once in a while. But thank you all so much. Thank you, Thaddeus Cook, for coming on. Have a great rest of the summer. Look forward to seeing you in Florida this fall and winter.
Thank you.
I hope, or possibly Puerto Rico. Thank you.
Yes.
My pleasure. Thanks, Thaddeus.
Bye-bye.
Bye.